Well, welcome to Ask a Responsive Fundraiser, where we take your questions to a fundraising expert so that ultimately you can grow generosity. Today, we're taking your questions to Karen Houghton. Karen is the CEO of Infinite Giving, helping nonprofits achieve financial sustainability through smart cash management, curated investments, and streamlined asset donations. As a registered investment advisor, Karen and her team lead the mission to strengthen nonprofits for better communities and a better world. Before founding Infinite Giving, which is currently partnering with Morgan Stanley's Inclusive Venture Labs, Karen held various leadership roles in philanthropy and tech. Her work has earned her recognition from Fast Company, Women in Technology, and Salesforce for innovation and impact. Karen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
All right, we're going to jump in with the first question, and it's this. We're seeing more donors ask about giving stocks or even crypto, but honestly, it feels a bit overwhelming for our team to navigate. What would you say to a nonprofit hesitant to start accepting asset-based donations? And what first steps would you recommend that we take?
Great question. I would start by saying, I get it. The financial system, the traditional financial system is really not made for nonprofits. And so there's so many things that are really easy for business and retail folks in the finance world that are incredibly more difficult when you are a nonprofit. And something like receiving stock gifts or even opening a brokerage account can be incredibly painful. So you're not alone. Unfortunately, it's just a bit of a broken system when it comes to being a tax-exempt entity. But there's also good news in that. And I want to talk about the good news, but I also want to talk about the next kind of pain point where people kind of look at it. So they're like, well, maybe there's no one who wants to give stocks. No one's asked us about it. And so it becomes that chicken and the egg problem is like, well, am I asking for it? No, but no one's asking me for it. And so what's a nonprofit leader to do? And I say this because even though I'm an investment advisor, now I've also been the executive director and founder and fundraiser of a nonprofit. So there is this whole like, how do I spend my time and money? But also, what are all of these future opportunities? And how do I steward my time and efforts of the team well? And honestly, asset gifts are a huge opportunity. And there's a lot of data points that can help us kind of start to rationalize, like, where do we put our time? So the average online cash gift is $128. The average stock gift is $8,000. And also many grants come in stock form too. So already you're like, all right, I have my intention. So even if they are less common, which they absolutely are, asset gifts are less common, they are often much, much bigger. In fact, there was a big study done by Dr. Russell James that found that nonprofits who ask for stock gifts in addition to cash actually raise 55% more over a 5-year period.
Wow.
Right? And every fundraiser listening to this is like, okay, you have my attention. So even though it's not a perfect science, it is something that if you're just saying, I don't know, it's too overwhelming, it's too hard, then the problem to solve is, well, how do we make it easier for you? How do we change opening a brokerage account from being a 12-week, 50+ page, application and process to something easy? And that's where there are solutions out there. So something like Infinite Giving, we can literally open a nonprofit brokerage account with 30 minutes of your time and 3 business days on our end. So there are solutions that are kind of slowly changing that traditional financing system because we are a company at Infinite Giving that's literally made for you.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the data, 55% more. That's exciting. An $8,000 average gift versus $128 average stock gift. And then you kind of move into, all right, well, who are our donors and who wants to actually give stocks? And then you're looking at a lot of millennials and Gen Z. So you're thinking, well, younger, perhaps less wealth, but then they prefer modern giving solutions, right? Like stock or crypto. Like the average person, much more of us are in the market than 10 to 20 years ago, right? It just used to be only for retirees, right? They also have those, but you are looking at this younger, kind of more modern generation. And then you want to think, well, how can we position our organization to really meet our donor where they are? right? We have to be able to have all of these giving options and then make it as easy for them. So we want to simplify that process. So
Yeah.
yes, you want a brokerage account, but now you can do it in 3 days and 30 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
And then how do you sell it and liquidate it? And what do those donation receipts look like? And there's all these special tax rules. Okay. Well, there's solutions to that too, right? So you can find partners like an Infinite Giving who can streamline that. I always love to talk about our clients, and we have one of our
Mm.
clients would be Habitat for Humanity in the state of Indiana. So we'll use just one of their chapters. And they had never had a brokerage account, and they were like, "We want to receive a stock gift. We don't know if it's very big, but we don't have the ability." And they got really overwhelmed by trying to figure out how to open a brokerage account
Mm.
because it was just a long, painful process. So we were able to open that brokerage account in just a few days with them. Fiduciary partnership. We got it, the ask on their website. We automated a whole flow for them. We do the automatic liquidation, the branded donation receipts. We take 0 transaction fees on the stock gift. So it's very
Mm.
easy and straightforward. Do you know in the first 6 months, we've processed more than $500,000 in stock gifts for them?
Wow.
So they went
That's
from
incredible.
never receiving to one to then being like, oh, let's make this opportunity available. How do we do this? And the ripple effect of those kind of larger gifts means then they were able to grow a reserve fund. And
Mm.
then they were able to get the reserve fund, and then we've helped them to, double the yield that they were getting in a bank, just like in a money market, right, with us. And you start to see this pathway to financial sustainability, which
Yeah.
ultimately that's where every nonprofit wants to be, right? Is how
Right.
do we get off that endless cycle and the scarcity mindset and just start to be really good stewards of what we've been given and how we're
Yeah.
thinking about that.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's
yeah.
fantastic. And love hearing too, just the impact, the real impact that's, being made in organizations, that you all are working with.
Yeah. So I think like when you really break it down, when it's like, all right, how do we start this? Like, look at your donor interest. I can't promise that if you open a brokerage account, stock gifts are going to like fly in. I wish we all wish that would happen, right?
Right.
But there's usually more than one person in your donor circle who wants to kind of take advantage of the tax efficiencies, right? So when you can give a stock gift, generally those tend to be 20 to 30% more because that donor gets a double tax savings where they're avoiding paying capital gains taxes, and then they're also getting the full value of their deduction. So that if you are not offering, to receive stock donations, I would say at the very least, please never ask that donor to cash it out and write you a check, because they're giving Uncle Sam money that could go to a good charitable cause. And ultimately, that's what that donor wants.
Yeah.
So look at that, open a brokerage account. You could find easier ways to do it. I don't suggest DIYing it because, again, there's just so many pain points in the traditional financial system. You update your gift acceptance policies. Again, if you have an advisor, like you have at Infinite Giving, we do it all for you, but whoever you have should be able to do that for you. And then it's repeat, share and educate, share and educate, share and educate, right? Letting that donors know, hey, did you know that we have this ability to do that? We make it really easy for you. Um, Often even folks who are already listening to this and they're like, yes, yes, we receive stock gifts, but it's not a lot and it's a painful process. I'm always like, what is the process, right? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
download the PDF, have your guy call our guy. Don't forget to call the nonprofit office, because absolutely, if you're already receiving stock gifts and you're DIYing it, you have received a gift and you have no idea who it comes from.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's
Yeah.
also in the financial system. Like there's not names attached to stock gifts. So again, you can find partnerships in ways,
Yep.
shameless plug like Infinite Giving, where we can always attach names to those gifts,
Yeah.
handle a lot of the donation receipts and things off your team. Um,
That's great.
but the good news is it is a better opportunity today than it was
Yeah.
10 years ago to get into that space. And we are
Good.
seeing a significant rise, especially with an up market. I mean, the amount of donations being given in stocks at the end of 2024 is likely near record breaking.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, let's go to our second question. It's this: our board is very risk adverse, so they've been hesitant to explore investing our reserves. So how can we ensure our board feels secure about investment decisions while protecting donor funds?
Yeah, great question. First, all nonprofits are risk averse, and that is wise, right? So that is where we want to be. We want to steward these funds well. But I think the other side of that coin is that being fearful or having a lack of curiosity about better ways or understanding about how you can steward your nonprofit funds is not wise. And so sometimes there are wonderful intentions that are being kind of emotionally led with fear or a lack of curiosity or understanding, where it's like, oh, we can't do any of that. These funds have to be here. So when you hear investment advisor, the first, especially if they work only with nonprofits, know you are entering into a relationship that if you wanted to be wild and crazy and put 100% in Tesla, they will say no. Right? So, and that's a silly example, right? But it's an element where advisors who serve nonprofits understand the risk tolerance is always going to be low. But sometimes what we feel like is safe, and I'm doing safe in quotations, is because that's not always the best kind of right path for a nonprofit. So something like FDIC insurance, right, in a bank, 250K per bank per nonprofit EIN. It is not per account. So sometimes nonprofit leaders will be like, oh, well, I have, 3 CDs and I got a savings account and a checking account. You're still under 250K FDIC. Or then the next, kind of solution is, well, I'm going to go open we onboarded somebody the other day, and they went from 11 bank accounts to an infinite giving account and one bank account. So they had 11 bank accounts because they were trying to spread it out and have FDIC coverage. It is solved by an FDIC sweep program. So that provides coverage up to, like, our FDIC sweep program is available up to $5 million. Super common in the business world. Banks don't offer that to nonprofits. And so you're looking at this where you're like, okay, well, how do we create efficiency? Well, sometimes, like, we have folks in millions of dollars with us just sitting in a cash FDIC sweep program at a higher yield rate than their bank. And we're investment advisors, right? So you can do cash holdings, you can do money markets. We are always trying to be thoughtful, stewardship, and that's always a conservative approach, but you want to be making strategic decisions that are not emotionally driven for our organizations. I know sometimes we even get the question of, like, we're a nonprofit. Nonprofits can't even invest. We're not allowed to, right? And I'm like, every endowment is invested actually in the market in a growth-oriented way. So I'm like, if you want to seek financial sustainability, first, it's, the first big milestone is having a reserve fund. Pre-COVID, 3 to 6 months of operational reserves. Post-COVID, 6 to 12 months. No right or wrong, right? But those are some industry standards. We serve hundreds of nonprofits and kind of financially manage their cash. That's what we're looking at. And then the question is, where is it? And often nonprofits are like, oh, well, it's in a bank making 1%, or it's in our checking. Oh, don't worry, it's in a money market, but it's at like 1.5% or maybe 2%. Well, even now, those rates are not competitive. So most banks are not offering nonprofits competitive rates. So again, you can get to an advisor like Infinite Giving, but we're going to look at cash management. So very low risk, high liquidity holdings. When you need it, you click transfer, it's transferred via ACH into your bank. And then you can also get into investments, but you can do it in highly diversified ways, ETFs, index funds, looking at growth-oriented strategies, longer term. So it's really good to think about short-term reserves, longer-term holdings, and or endowments, and then looking at the best way to do that.
That's great.
And often it requires education and transparency with the board, right? It's like, hey, we have somebody who deeply understands nonprofits. Hey, here's how transparent the process is. And it doesn't have to be under some incredibly high advisory fee.
Yeah, that's great. All right, last question. We've seen a lot of shifts in how donors give, especially in the last 5 years. So what trends do you see shaping nonprofit finance in the next few years, and how can we stay ahead of the curve?
I mean, I'm biased, but I think the rise of asset-based giving is going to continue, right? So you look at donors and just all the tax savings that they can get, and just the more commonplace it is for higher capacity donors who are wanting to be more philanthropic, right? The rise of donor advised funds, the rise of crypto. Everybody thinks crypto is dying, and then bam, here it is again, right? And so you look at all of these And knowing that this also, whether you believe it in or not, like crypto, it's real. The IRS treats
Yeah.
it like securities, right? So nonprofits have to meet donors where they are. And I think being able to make those types of gifts as streamlined and available and easy to do and remove all that friction for your team and for your donors can be really important. This is nothing new, but I think focusing on transparency and impact, right? That's the key of what we all do always. But
Yeah.
really looking at how do you have real-time donor transparency? Where are those funds? And the financial reporting and storytelling are really important. Um, Digital transformation is probably another one that I talk about a lot, where it's just looking at, CRMs and platforms like Virtuous, right? And then even with partnerships like with Infinite Giving, like how do we work together to really evolve and make donor engagement even more personalized, more data driven? And then, with somebody like us, it's that fiduciary capacity as well. Um, and then I would think really looking at sustainability. So financial sustainability is no longer, it's like if you're spending down and you're in that scarcity mindset, you've got to be careful, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what leads to burnout. Donors don't give bigger gifts to organizations that they fear may not be around in 6 to 12 months. So
Right.
building a reserve fund, looking at making endowments more accessible. There's quasi unrestricted endowments. We do a lot of endowment creation, right? And just normalizing legacy gifts, smaller endowments, micro endowments, things that you can fundraise for once that give for a long time to come. I think endowments are going to be, and they already are, we're getting a huge influx of like, hey, it's not just higher ed anymore. It's not just these huge organizations. Smaller organizations can have an endowment of $1 million. But guess what?
Yeah.
That $1 million endowment is going to give off $50,000 a year that you're not fundraising to support a very important cause or piece of the work that you're doing for literally generations to come. So
Yeah.
I think really having sustainability, particularly through endowments, is going to be a big growth point as well.
Yeah. Well, Karen, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, but also just the wisdom and the experience that you're able to share with people to educate and to help continue to grow generosity. We appreciate your time today and for you sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure.